camp alone pretty often, especially after rough stretches at work. I'm a paramedic, which means I've seen pretty much every stupid way a human body can get wrecked, and sometimes the only way to breathe again is by stepping away from it. Medicine Bow felt perfect, empty and quiet. Funny how the one place I went to clear my head ended up showing me something I still can't logically account for. I kept it simple. One small clearing off a forest road I'd camped at once years back. No fancy gear, just the tent, a cheap lantern, a camp chair that always feels slightly broken, and a first aid kit laid out the way I always do. My truck was parked maybe 40 yards away through some brush. It felt good being somewhere that didn't hum or beep. The first night was perfect. Not Instagram perfect, just calm. Wind in the branches, tiny critters breaking leaves now and then, an owl far off. I ate, read a paperback, and fell asleep fast. Honestly, I wanted the whole trip to be like that. Night 2 proved me wrong. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up. One of those abrupt awakenings where your eyes pop open and you don't know why. The tent was pitch black, but there was this faint glow bleeding through the fabric on the back side. Soft and white, like moonlight with direction. I unzipped the flap and leaned out just enough to look. I saw lights. Small white dots moving behind the tree line. Not flashlight beams. The glow didn't cast shadows or waver like someone walking with a handheld. They looked like orbs or steady points, floating between waist and chest height. My brain immediately started troubleshooting. Hikers? Rangers? Drones? Reflection from something? I kept running down options, trying to categorize what I was seeing instead of treating it like something bizarre. But every explanation fell apart when I noticed how the lights moved. Too smooth for walking, too steady for stumbling, too low and silent to be drones, and always weaving through the trees with this weird consistency, like they were following a path. I should have been scared right away, but honestly, I felt more confused than anything. Paramedic mode, break down the problem, find the rational piece. So I slipped on a jacket, grabbed my headlamp, and sat in my camp chair to watch. The woods were silent. No footsteps, no voices, no engine deeper in the brush. Just those little white lights drifting behind the first row of trunks. Every once in a while, one of them shot upward, straight up, and vanished. Then another would glow back to life farther down, like whatever was out there didn't care about distance or obstacles. I actually whispered, "What the hell?" at one point, even though nobody was around to hear me. I thought about yelling out, just a quick hello or anybody out there, but a part of me didn't want whatever that was to know I'd noticed, and that instinct felt important. After a few minutes, the lights dimmed out, one by one. The forest went completely dark again, and for some reason, that made everything feel heavier. I sat for another minute, telling myself it was just drones or some weird ranger equipment test, even though I knew that didn't sit right. Then I went back into the tent and zipped up, trying to sleep. I almost drifted off when I heard the footsteps, soft, slow, circling the tent. Not tiny scurries or deer hooves, these were careful steps, heavy enough to bend twigs underfoot, spaced out like whoever it was trying to listen between each one. My pulse kicked up, but I didn't move. I just stared upward, listening. I pressed the tent fabric with my fingers to steady myself and raised my headlamp, turning it on so a glow spread across the inside walls. I expected to see a moving silhouette, but there was nothing. Just the faint shapes of branches swaying above me. The steps dragged around to the back of the tent, where my head was. They stopped right there. I stopped breathing, like instinct. The kind of instinct you get from walking into a dangerous scene and knowing you need to listen before you act. Then I heard it, a light tap on the tent pole. Not enough to shake it, more like someone touching it with a finger, testing how thick the fabric was, testing where I was. I snapped. I unzipped the front of the tent so fast the zipper snagged, grabbed my knife, and burst out with my headlamp swinging. Nothing. The clearing was empty. Cold. Silent. The trees were so still it felt like they were holding their breath with me. I swept the light around, scanning for prints, shadows, shapes. There was nothing between me and the road but brush and dirt. I walked toward the tree line where the lights had been earlier. Not a single fresh footprint. No tire tracks either. No sign of anything. That's when something inside me just said, "We're done here." I'm not going to pretend I sprinted or panicked. I didn't. But I packed up just about as fast as any training drill I've ever done. Tent down, gear thrown in the truck bed, headlamp never turned off. I drove until I hit the first gas station with lights bright enough to sting my eyes. Parked there and sat in the cab, hands on the wheel, telling myself I'd gotten rattled over floating dots and footsteps. That exhaustion had made me see patterns in shadows, but the more I tried to rationalize it, the more it felt like lying to myself. When I got home later, I spent a stupid amount of time looking up every possible explanation. Drone models, ranger night patrols, survey equipment, experimental forestry tech. Nothing matched silent floating lights that shoot upward. Whatever was out there in Medicine Bow didn't feel like something I want to meet again. These days, when someone suggests a solo camping trip in that forest, I just tell them, I'm suddenly very into Airbnbs. I've always thought of myself as the paranoid one in my relationship. I'm a nursing student, I listen to true crime while folding laundry, and I triple-check locks before bed. My boyfriend makes fun of me for it, lightly, in that "you're cute but dramatic" way. And I'll say this up front, I wasn't wrong about being cautious. I just never expected to be right in the way that mattered. This happened last year, outside Sedona, Arizona. We wanted a cheap couples weekend. Red rocks, stars, enamel mugs, all the aesthetic things you pretend aren't cheesy. We were broke, so instead of an official campground, we picked a dispersed spot off a forest road a blogger said was perfect for privacy. We found the spot late afternoon, a small clearing with an old fire ring, pine trees creating a semicircle of shade, and a sliver of red rock visible between branches. Quiet, warm. Close enough to the road that we could hear the occasional car, but far enough that nobody would randomly walk past us. We set up the tent, laughed about how romantic it was to share one sleeping bag, cooked a terrible camp dinner, and watched the sky go dark. It was peaceful in a way I didn't know how badly I needed. Before bed, I did what I always do when camping, ran both zippers to the top and clipped them together with a small carabiner. I remember making a joke, "See, all my podcasts trained me for this moment," and he laughed. Just after midnight, I half woke to fabric shifting, a soft little brushing sound. I assumed it was him rolling over or maybe the rainfly catching a breeze. I didn't open my eyes. I adjusted my legs inside the sleeping bag and drifted back out. The night didn't feel dramatic. Nothing jolted me awake. No nightmares, just that tiny sound I ignored. Morning came with that bright yellow tent glow. My back ached from sleeping on rocks, he was snoring in my ear, and everything felt normal and harmless. He made a dumb joke about camping being invented by liars, and I reached up automatically to grab the tent zippers. That's when everything changed. The carabiner was hanging loose, and the zipper was halfway down. My brain stalled. I stared at it like it was a math problem I'd forgotten how to solve. "I know I clipped this," I said. He sat up. "What?" I turned the flap so he could see. He blinked hard. "You definitely clipped it." We both knew it. We both remembered it. I asked if he got up to pee and maybe forgot to re-clip it. He shook his head immediately. Didn't leave the tent once. Something cold ran through me, a mismatch between memory and reality. We stepped outside, and the second wave of wrong details hit us. One of our backpacks was turned at a different angle, like someone nudged it with a foot. A granola bar wrapper that had been inside the pack last night was now sitting on top of it. My shoes, lined up neatly the night before, were no longer side by side. One was slightly forward, the other angled out, like someone slipped their feet in halfway and then stepped out fast. Our cooler latch was unhooked. Everything almost where it had been. but not quite. Outside the tent, in the dust, were footprints. Not ours. Different tread. They circled the tent, stopped right where the zipper was, then faded into the harder ground, giving us no direction of where the person came from or where they went. That's when he tried the rational voice. Maybe it was a ranger checking on us? At 2 a.m, I shot back, without a flashlight, without saying a word. The look he gave me said he already knew that wasn't the answer. We didn't stay for breakfast. We packed up with this tight, quiet urgency. No discussion, just unspoken agreement, and drove back to town. But the real horror didn't hit until later. We were home, unpacking, when he suddenly said, "Oh, my phone. I set it to record last night." He'd tucked his phone in the tent pocket before bed, set to capture ambient sound. We'd forgotten about it. We sat on the couch, still smelling like smoke, listening to hours of wind and crickets. It was almost calming. Then the timestamp hit 2:07 a.m. A new sound faded in. The unmistakable sound of a zipper being eased down, slowly guided. I heard myself shift in my sleep on the recording. Heard him mutter something and adjust. The zipper stopped. Then, very faintly, the crunch of gravel directly outside the tent. Light, careful footsteps. We leaned closer to the phone, barely breathing. And then we heard it. A whisper. Not a word either of us could make out. Just a human voice, inches from us, saying something low and calm. It lasted 1 second, maybe 2. But I'll never forget the tone. Not aggressive, just assessing. The recording continued. We didn't finish the rest of the file. We didn't talk much afterward either. Just sat there with this electric silence between us, both trying to pretend we weren't replaying the same realization. Somebody opened our tent while we were sleeping, stood there long enough to move things, listened to us breathe, whispered something, and left without taking anything. We didn't send the audio to anyone. What would we even say? "Hi, someone maybe watched us sleep. Please help." There wasn't a crime, no damage, no missing items. Just the knowledge that a stranger was comfortable enough to unzip our tent, inspect us, and walk away as if we'd passed some test. Since then, I don't do dispersed camping. I only go to official campgrounds. I double-clip zippers. I keep a headlamp and keys inside the sleeping bag with me. And I don't laugh at true crime narrators anymore when they say, "Trust your instincts." Because now I know exactly what it feels like to wake up safe and realize that safety was an illusion. Someone unzipped our tent, looked inside, and decided to wait. And somehow, that's the part that keeps me up at night. I'll be honest up front. I'm not the camping guy in my friend group. I'm the bartender. I like neon signs, music loud enough to drown thoughts, and chairs that don't sink into dirt. But last summer, all 4 of us decided a boys' weekend in Michigan's Upper Peninsula was exactly what we needed. It was me, Kyle, his cousin Mark, and our friend Jesse. 4 grown men acting like we were about to rediscover the frontier, even though we packed more beer than actual food. We found this nice little lakeside spot, 1 ring of rocks for a fire, 1 patch of dirt for a tent, lake glittering through the trees. Perfect if you didn't think too hard about bathrooms or bears. First couple hours were straight comedy. The tent almost flew into the lake twice. Mark argued with the instructions like they insulted his mother. We got it standing anyway, tossed all our sleeping bags inside, and officially declared it livable. Daytime was everything it should have been. Swimming, roasting in the sun, stupid jokes, skipping rocks, pretending none of us were dealing with breakups, job stress, or real life. The place felt peaceful, harmless, until the old man showed up. It was late afternoon. Sun still bright, everything glowing warm yellow. I saw someone walking on the trail. A man, maybe mid-70s, flannel shirt, faded cap, a stick he used like a hiking pole. He didn't wave. He just stopped right at the edge of camp. Not in it. Not out of it. Right on the border. Kyle raised his beer. "Hey man, you lost or want to hang with us?" The old guy shook his head. His expression didn't change. He looked at us like he'd already made up his mind. "You boys should pack up and head out before dark," he said. Just like that. No hello. No reason. Just the warning. Mark grinned. "Yeah? Why's that?" The man's eyes drifted over the camp, the tent, the firewood, the cooler. He didn't look scared or angry, just certain. "Woods change at night out here," he said. "You don't want to be in them when they do." We waited for him to say more, but he didn't. He gave us a nod that felt more like a goodbye and kept walking down the trail. We did what any group of grown idiots would do. We laughed it off. "Ooh, spooky woods," Jesse teased. Kyle clinked his beer against mine. "Probably just hates campers." I said, "If he wants us gone so bad, he could at least help pack." We moved on, but if I'm honest, even while joking, something about the old guy lingered with me. Night fell faster than expected. 1 minute, the lake was glowing orange. The next, it was a sheet of black glass. We lit the fire, turned the Bluetooth speaker down low, and kept talking. That's when I noticed the silence. The insects stopped. All at once. No frogs, no splashes from the lake, no rustling. Just our fire and our voices. Then something moved just outside the firelight. One heavy step, another. Branches bending, not breaking. Kyle grabbed his flashlight and pointed it into the trees. The beam hit nothing but trunks and darkness. Whatever was out there stayed just behind the limit of the light. "Probably a deer," Mark said, a little too confidently. We yelled out, trying to sound brave. "Hey, yo, old man, if that's you, we brought beer." No response, but the walking stopped. We sat closer to the fire after that, pretending it was for warmth. Jesse got up to pee by a nearby tree, headlamp bouncing as he walked away. He came back less than a minute later, fast, face pale. "What?" Kyle asked. "You see a squirrel coming at you with a knife?" "No," Jesse said quietly. "I saw eyes." "Animal eyes?" Mark asked. Jesse shook his head. "They were at my level." None of us joked after that. A few minutes later, the woods started moving again, this time circling. You could hear it shifting around the perimeter of our little clearing. Sometimes behind us, sometimes beside us. Never running, never approaching. Just watching. Once, on a gust of wind, I swear I heard something else. Not words exactly, more like someone talking too low to understand carried between the trees. I tried brushing it off as nerves, or the wind, or my imagination. But my mouth had gone dry, and even I wasn't cracking jokes anymore. Finally I said, "Let's get in the tent. We can keep talking inside. I'm done being out here." Nobody argued. We crawled inside the tent, zipped it up fast, and sat there shoulder to shoulder. Kyle held a knife. I had the flashlight pointed at the ceiling like I was ready to swing it around at the first sound. The tent suddenly felt thin. Too thin. At one point, something brushed against the outside of the fabric. Not hard. Not aggressive. Just enough to let us know it was right there. No one breathed for a few seconds. Another brush, this time on Jesse's side. We didn't say a word. We stayed in that tent the rest of the night, talking quietly, drifting in and out of shallow sleep, jerking awake at every pop from the fire outside. When dawn finally crept in, the relief felt like a physical thing. We unzipped the tent and stepped out slowly. That's when we saw them. Footprints. Wide, heavy impressions, circling our campsite. 3 different sizes, looping around the tent, and the little tripod of twigs Jesse had set up as a joke earlier, it was now standing less than a foot from the tent door, leaning toward it. Someone had moved it during the night. We didn't discuss it. We just packed up. Fast. Nobody said we were scared. The official reason was the weather, even though the forecast was perfect. On the drive out, we passed the trail again. I kept looking for the old man. He wasn't there. Now, when people ask if the trip was fun, I say, yeah, mostly. But sometimes late at night when I'm closing the bar and walking alone to my car, I think about that old man standing at the edge of our camp, And the one thing I can't shake is this. If he was messing with us, he did a perfect job. And if he wasn't, we ignored the only warning we got. I took that trip because I needed to prove something to myself. After the divorce, the apartment felt like a half-empty storage unit, and I kept catching myself turning to say things to someone who wasn't there anymore. I figured a few nights alone in Ocala would reset my brain. Just quiet, trees, and the kind of silence you don't get when you're sharing walls with people arguing through drywall. I picked a campground with amenities just barely above primitive. A bathhouse, a water spigot, a few numbered sites spaced out in a loop. Thick trees, sandy soil, Spanish moss hanging off branches like cotton. It felt safe enough, but still remote. Exactly what I wanted. First day was good. I set up the tent, strung a tarp between a couple trees, got the stove going, made a simple dinner, canned chili and a beer, then just sat by the fire feeling the way the night air settles over everything in Ocala. You can hear insects and leaves brushing one another. No TV, no text pings, no tension. I remember thinking, this is the first quiet I've had in months. The only thing that felt off was a campsite a little farther down the loop. One tent, one old sedan. No fire, no lantern glow, no clatter of someone cooking or setting up gear. It wasn't weird enough to worry about. Maybe they'd gone to bed early. Maybe they were night hikers or something. I didn't dwell on it. By around 11, I was poking at the fire, letting it burn down to coals. I had that relaxed, beer-warmed heaviness settling into my shoulders. It was the first moment in a long time I wasn't replaying old arguments or trying to guess what I'd done wrong in the marriage. And then I heard footsteps. It wasn't someone rushing or sneaking. It was an even crunch of sand and leaves, coming from the path between the campsites. I waited for a flashlight beam. A greeting. Something that made sense. Instead, a man walked straight into my circle of firelight and sat down on the log across from me like we'd arranged it. No hesitation at all. Not even a hello. Just walked in, lowered himself onto the log, and settled in like he belonged there. He looked late 30s, maybe early 40s. Faded t-shirt, jeans, no backpack, no water bottle, no anything. Average height, average build, but he had this wide grin on his face, not friendly or excited, just fixed, like a mask. I tried to be polite. "Hey man, you from the site down there?" He didn't answer. He just stared into the fire, then at me, then back at the fire. This slow, repeating pattern, like he was waiting his turn in a conversation I hadn't agreed to be part of. I cleared my throat, tried again. "Everything all right?" Still nothing. Just that grin. I tried small talk, weather, fishing, the usual camper stuff. He didn't respond to a single word, didn't nod, didn't shrug, just stared and grinned. And the longer it went on, the more that expression felt like a warning instead of a smile. Then I noticed his hands. His fingernails were dark, not dirt from the campsite, but stained like grease or oil baked into them. And he kept flexing one hand, slowly, like he was psyching himself up for something. That was the moment a very old, very primal part of my brain started whispering that I shouldn't let that man get behind me. Not ever. But I kept my tone calm. I didn't want to escalate anything. "I'm gonna crash soon," I said finally. "Long drive today. You good, man?" That's when he finally spoke. "You're in my spot," said it brightly, cheerfully, like I'd stolen his seat at a backyard barbecue. I blinked. I actually booked this one online, Site 14. I even reached over and grabbed my printed reservation. I held it out a little like that would clear everything up. He didn't look at it. He just shook his head and repeated, still smiling, "No, you're in my spot." The way he said it had nothing to do with campsite numbers. Something cold unspooled in my chest. I stood up slowly, keeping the fire between us. "Why don't we go talk to the camp host?" I said. "Make sure nothing got mixed up." The man's grin dropped like a switch was flipped. He stood up too, rising in this unnervingly smooth motion, and took 3 small steps backward without turning around, eyes locked on mine the whole time. Then he stepped past the edge of the firelight and vanished into the dark between the palmettos and pines. No flashlight to follow, just swallowed by the dark in a way that didn't feel normal. I didn't move for a full minute. I kept staring at the space he'd disappeared into, waiting for him to reappear or for some twig snap to tell me where he'd gone. Nothing. That was it. The fire hissed softly, the night hummed around me, and I realized I didn't want to spend even a second unprotected. I put the fire out, threw what I could into my car, and sat inside with all the doors locked. Seat pushed back, knife on my lap. I didn't sleep a minute. Everything sounded like footsteps around the car. When the sun finally started smearing orange across the trees, I stepped out of the car with shaky legs and went to check that neighboring campsite. Tent, sedan. But no chairs, no lantern, no trash, no tire marks suggesting someone had driven in recently. It looked like a staged site, like someone set it up just to make it look occupied without ever actually using it. I walked straight to the camp host's station, tried not to sound insane. "Hey, did the people at Site 17 check in?" The host clicked around on his little computer. "Reserved," he said, "but they never came to the office. We figured it was a no-show." I left early, packed everything, didn't even bother folding the tent. I just wanted out of that forest. I've met drunk guys at campgrounds, lonely guys, weird guys. They all want something. A beer, a lighter, company, conversation. But that man, he wanted something I can't name. Something that had nothing to do with camping or conversation. Something that felt personal, even though I'd never seen him before. I ended the trip early and don't regret it one bit. I don't know who he was. I don't know where he came from. And I definitely don't know why he walked into my firelight like he'd been waiting for me. But I know one thing. He didn't care about the campsite. He just wanted me to understand I wasn't where I thought I was. I spent 8 years in the Army before this story happened, so being alone in the woods doesn't rattle me. It's usually the opposite. No traffic, no civilians yelling into phones, no radios buzzing in the background, just trees and my own footsteps. That's what I wanted when I headed into Shenandoah for a 3-day backpacking trip in 2019. I had a solid route and a light pack. Told a friend my general plan. Nothing complicated. Day 2, late afternoon, I cut slightly off trail near a ridge and found a good spot. Flat ground, some cover, and enough visibility to see anything coming. I set up camp the same way I've done on countless field exercises. Food hung high, tent positioned with a main exit, boots and knife within reach, everything squared away. I boiled water for dinner and watched the last light bleed through the trees. Perfect. Quiet. Exactly the kind of evening I'd been craving. I was cleaning up when I heard someone call, "Hello," in this overly friendly tone. Not worried, hikers cross paths out here all the time. I answered, "Over here." A man stepped between the trees. 40s, average build, wearing brand new looking hiking clothes. No dirt on him, no sweat. "Glad I'm not the only one out here," he said. "I think I got turned around." He named a junction he was supposedly trying to find, but when I asked which way he came from, he pointed in the wrong direction. Not a little wrong, completely off. "How long you been lost?" I asked. "Couple hours," he said, but his shirt looked like it had come straight off a hanger. No creases from a backpack strap, no bottle in his hand. Nothing. Then he started in with the questions. "You camping around here tonight? How long you staying? You out here alone? You get service up here?" Each one sounded casual on its own, but together, they were a checklist. I told him the trail he needed was back the opposite way, and I offered to walk him to it. He refused immediately. "Nah, I like exploring," he said, but his eyes kept drifting across my camp, over my tent, my stove, my knife. He wasn't looking for the trail. He was assessing the space, trying to understand what he'd be dealing with. When he asked again if I was alone, I lied without blinking. "No, group of us a couple miles back. I'm just the first one setting up." His whole posture shifted. Slightly, but enough. Whatever he thought I was, a lone target maybe, suddenly wasn't the case. "Ah, nice. Yeah, I should, get back before dark," he said, laughing awkwardly. And this is the part I still think about. He left with no pack, no gear, not even a water bottle. Just wandered deeper into the trees like he was heading somewhere familiar, or somewhere he'd already planned. When he finally disappeared from sight, I didn't tear camp down immediately. I waited, acted like I was still prepping my stove, listening, watching. A few minutes later, I heard a branch snap off to my right, not in the direction he'd walked. Then another, a little farther downslope. Controlled steps. I packed. Not messy, not reckless, just efficient. Years of muscle memory clicked in. Tent down, food bag lowered, everything stuffed and clipped in minutes. I put 2 miles between me and that ridge, choosing a second campsite with better visibility. No thick brush, open ground, a defensible angle. Night settled in and I stayed awake longer than usual, listening to the kind of subtle movement you only pick up through experience. Too far to call a threat, too close to ignore. Every so often, a small noise, a step, a shift, floating from the same general direction. Could have been a deer, could have been branches. But when you've done enough time around predators, human ones, you learn the difference between wandering and watching. I left early the next morning and ran into a ranger near one of the main junctions. He asked how my trip was going, and I told him, only weird thing was a guy who wandered into my camp yesterday. Said he was lost but didn't look it. No gear, no pack. Kept asking if I was alone. The ranger's expression tightened immediately. "Where was this?" he asked. I gave him the ridge area and watched his face sink just a hair. "We've had a couple complaints about a man bothering solo hikers out that way," he said. "Asking where they're staying, how long they'll be out, that kind of thing. No ID yet. If you see him again, don't engage. Get to a station." That's all he said, but the look on his face was enough. I didn't need the details. Back at my car, I kept thinking about the man walking away with nothing but the clothes he was wearing. No pack meant no food, no jacket, no shelter, no reason to be lost. He wasn't surviving out there. He was hunting. People picture lost hikers as harmless, somebody who wants directions, maybe water, maybe help. Sometimes that's true, but anyone who's done search and rescue knows the woods don't just swallow people. They also attract people who take advantage of how isolated they are. Someone like the man I saw doesn't need a weapon or a threat to be dangerous. All he needs is a target who thinks they understand the situation. That day, I made sure I wasn't one. I still backpack, still camp alone sometimes, but I lie faster now. I listen harder, and if anyone wanders into my campsite with a clean shirt, no gear, and too many questions, I don't wait for the story about how they got lost. I leave first. If you kept thinking, man, camping is supposed to be peaceful, you're not alone. Smash that like button, subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and tell me in the comments which story messed with you the most. And if you think long drives are relaxing, you haven't watched this channel enough. This next video will ruin highways for you. Click now to watch 4 scary road trip horror stories, because sometimes the danger doesn't come from the trees. It comes from the driver who won't stop tailing you. Or stay right here. The algorithm has another nightmare ready for you. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.